Really didn't destroy a beautiful song for her. She asked graciously for me to come and interlope a little bit, and that's what I did. It's just I love the song, and
Dwight Yoakam once stood as an unmovable pillar in country music, a leather-clad renegade who refused to bend to Nashville's polished conventions, a voice that could crack open the hardest heart with its raw honesty. He was the cowboy who brought Bakersfield back from the dead, who made honky tonk cool again when everyone else was chasing crossover dreams. But today, the headlines surrounding this legend tell a different story, one that has fans across the world holding their breath with concern. What has happened to the man who once commanded stages with effortless charisma? The whispers have grown louder, the rumors more persistent. Is the health of this iconic figure deteriorating? Has the relentless road finally taken its toll on the cowboy who seemed invincible? These are the questions swirling through the minds of millions who grew up with his music, who found themselves in the melancholy of 1,000 miles from nowhere, who danced to guitars, Cadillacs, who felt understood by his unapologetically authentic voice. The contrast is stark and unsettling. This is the same man who revolutionized country music in the 1980s, who stood defiantly against the Nashville establishment, who proved that staying true to your roots could lead to platinum success. Dwight didn't just survive the music industry, he reshaped it in his image, skinny jeans and all. But now, as headlines shift from celebrating his artistry to expressing concern about his well-being, fans are left wondering, is this the beginning of the end for one of country music's most influential voices? The silence from Dwight himself only deepens the mystery, leaving us to piece together fragments of information while hoping against hope that the legend still has chapters left to write. Dwight David Yoakam was born on October 23, 1956, in Pikeville, Kentucky, deep in the heart of Appalachia, where coal mines run deep and country music runs deeper. Raised in Columbus, Ohio, after his family relocated, Dwight grew up immersed in the sounds of Buck Owens, Lefty Frizzell, and Merle Haggard, the architects of the Bakersfield sound that would later become his signature. Even as a young man, Dwight possessed an uncompromising vision of what country music should be: honest, raw, and rooted in tradition, not manufactured in boardrooms. His journey to stardom was anything but conventional. In 1977, fresh out of college with dreams bigger than his bank account, Dwight made the pilgrimage that countless aspiring country singers had made before him. He headed to Nashville, but Music City had no interest in what this Kentucky kid was selling. The gatekeepers of Nashville found his sound too raw, too traditional, too different from the polished country pop that dominated the airwaves in the late 70s. They wanted crossover appeal. Dwight wanted authenticity. The rejection stung, but it also liberated him. Instead of compromising his artistic vision or returning home defeated, Dwight made an unexpected move. He packed up and headed west to Los Angeles, of all places, where he began playing punk clubs and dive bars in the early 1980s. It was an unlikely setting for a honky-tonk traditionalist, but Dwight recognized something the Nashville establishment couldn't see. Rebellion is rebellion, whether it's wrapped in leather and safety pins or denim and cowboy boots. The punk rockers and alternative music fans in Los Angeles didn't care about Nashville conventions. They just wanted music that felt real and uncompromising. Dwight gave them exactly that. His persistence paid off. In 1984, Dwight released an independent EP titled Guitars, Cadillacs, etc., etc. The 6-track collection was a revelation, blending the traditional twang of Bakersfield country with the energy of rock and roll. The title track became an underground sensation, catching the attention of Reprise Records, who signed him and re-released the EP as his debut full-length album in 1986. The album exploded, going platinum and establishing Dwight as a force to be reckoned with in country music. But it was his collaboration with his idol, Buck Owens, that truly cemented his place in country music history. In 1988, Dwight convinced the semi-retired legend to join him on a duet of Streets of Bakersfield. The song shot to #1, introducing a new generation to Buck Owens while simultaneously validating Dwight's mission to resurrect the Bakersfield sound. It was a perfect marriage of past and present, and it proved that Dwight wasn't just mimicking his heroes, he was carrying their torch forward with reverence and innovation. Throughout the late 80s and early 90s, Dwight refused to soften his edges or chase trends. While other country artists were incorporating pop production and synthesizers, He doubled down on steel guitars, fiddles, and honky-tonk rhythms. His refusal to compromise became his greatest strength, and albums like Hillbilly Deluxe, Buenas Noches from a Lonely Room, and If There Was a Way solidified his status as one of country music's most important voices, a living bridge between the genre's traditional roots and its contemporary possibilities. Dwight Yoakam didn't just make music, he created a movement. With his signature look of impossibly tight jeans, low-slung cowboy hats worn at an angle that defied physics, and vintage Western shirts that looked like they'd been plucked from a 1950s honky-tonk, Dwight became as much a visual icon as a musical one. But it was his sound that truly revolutionized country music. While Nashville was busy polishing every rough edge until country music sounded more like adult contemporary pop, Dwight was in the studio channeling the spirits of Buck Owens and Lefty Frizzle, creating music that felt dangerous, authentic, and alive. His influence extended far beyond traditional country audiences. Rock fans embraced him because his music had bite and attitude. Alternative country artists who would later form the Americana movement looked to Dwight as a godfather figure, who proved you could honor tradition while still sounding fresh and relevant. His albums sold millions, but more importantly, they mattered. They changed the conversation about what country music could be in the modern era. The numbers tell part of the story. Dwight scored an astounding 12 #1 singles on the Billboard Hot Country Songs chart, with hits like I Sang Dixie, Streets of Bakersfield, and 1,000 Miles from Nowhere becoming standards that defined an era. He sold over 25 million albums worldwide, with multiple platinum and gold certifications. Songs like Guitars, Cadillacs, Honky Tonk Man, and Fast as You became anthems for a generation that wanted their country music to have some grit and soul. But beyond commercial success, Dwight possessed something more valuable: credibility. When he brought Buck Owens out of semi-retirement for Streets of Bakersfield, he didn't just score a hit. He reminded the world why the Bakersfield sound mattered in the first place. The song's success revitalized Buck's career and introduced his catalog to millions of younger listeners who might never have discovered him otherwise. It was an act of artistic generosity that revealed Dwight's deep respect for the genre's history and his desire to honor those who came before him. Dwight's influence on fashion cannot be overlooked either. In an era when country stars wore rhinestone-studded suits and big hair, Dwight brought a retro-cool aesthetic that influenced everyone from contemporary country artists to indie rockers. His style was simultaneously vintage and timeless, a perfect visual representation of his musical philosophy: respect the past, but make it your own. Then there was Hollywood. In 1996, Dwight made his acting debut in Billy Bob Thornton's critically acclaimed film Sling Blade, playing the abusive boyfriend Doyle Hargraves with such menacing authenticity that critics and audiences alike were stunned. This wasn't a vanity cameo. This was serious acting. Dwight proved he could disappear into a character. And suddenly, he wasn't just a country music star. He was a legitimate actor. Roles in films like The Newton Boys, Panic Room, and Logan Lucky followed, showcasing his range and cementing his status as a multi-talented entertainer who refused to be boxed into a single category. Dwight became more than a musician. He became a cultural icon. Blue-collar workers saw themselves in his music, while urban hipsters appreciated his authenticity and style. He appeared on David Letterman's show more than any other musical guest. His music was featured in films and television shows. Artists from multiple genres cited him as an influence. Dwight Yoakam had achieved something rare. He'd stayed completely true to himself while also achieving mainstream success, proving that authenticity and commercial viability weren't mutually exclusive. His Grammy Awards, his induction into various halls of fame, his collaborations with artists ranging from Buck Owens to Beck, all of it painted a picture of an artist who had transcended genre boundaries while never abandoning his honky-tonk roots. Dwight had won the long game, and his legacy seemed secure. But even legends are not immune to the passage of time, and as the new millennium unfolded, something began to shift. The 2000s saw Dwight gradually stepping back from the relentless pace that had defined his career for 2 decades. The constant touring, the studio sessions, the promotional obligations, the machinery of fame that had once energized him now seemed to weigh more heavily. His album releases became less frequent, his tours more selective. To some, it looked like a natural evolution, an artist maturing and choosing quality over quantity. To others, especially his most devoted fans, it raised quiet concerns. The music industry itself was changing dramatically. The Bakersfield sound that Dwight had championed was once again being pushed aside, this time by a wave of pop country that made the Nashville sound of the 80s seem traditional by comparison. Country radio had little interest in honky-tonk authenticity when they could play slickly produced crossover hits. Dwight found himself in a familiar position, out of step with commercial trends, but this time without the same hunger to fight the system. He'd already proven his point. He'd already won his battles. Now, increasingly, he seemed content to work on his own terms, even if that meant less visibility. But there were other factors at play, darker undercurrents that Dwight kept carefully hidden from public view. Rumors began circulating about his health, whispers that grew louder with each canceled appearance or postponed tour date. Those close to him spoke in careful, measured tones about how the years of constant touring had taken their toll. Decades of one-night stands in different cities, of sleeping on tour buses and in hotel rooms, of pushing through exhaustion and illness to make the show, it all adds up, and Dwight's body was apparently keeping score. Reports surfaced of weight loss and fatigue. Photos from rare public appearances showed a man who looked older than his years, the rakish charm weathered by time and wear. The lean physique that had once made those skinny jeans iconic now looked almost gaunt. Fans who had followed him since the Guitars, Cadillacs days noticed the change and worried. Was he sick? Was something seriously wrong? Dwight, true to his intensely private nature, offered no answers, no reassurances, only silence. His personal life had also weathered its share of storms. His high-profile relationship with actress Sharon Stone in the 1990s had made tabloid headlines, thrusting Dwight into a level of celebrity scrutiny he'd never courted and clearly never enjoyed. When that relationship ended, Dwight retreated further into privacy, building walls around his personal life that even his most persistent fans couldn't penetrate. He gave fewer interviews. He stopped sharing personal details. The man who had once poured his heart into his music became increasingly enigmatic off-stage. This desire for privacy, while understandable, created its own problems. In the absence of information, speculation flourished. Every cancellation became evidence of declining health. Every long gap between albums sparked rumors of retirement, or worse. Dwight's silence, which he likely viewed as maintaining healthy boundaries, instead created an information vacuum that gossip and concern rushed to fill. The toll of fame, the constant scrutiny, the demands, the pressure to always be on had clearly affected him. Friends and collaborators spoke carefully about how Dwight had always been intensely private, how he'd never been comfortable with the celebrity aspect of his success. He'd wanted to make music, not be a tabloid fixture. But in the modern media landscape, you couldn't have one without the other, and Dwight seemed to be withdrawing from the whole enterprise, rather than compromise his privacy. What had once been a career in high gear was now coasting, and while some artists fade gracefully into legacy status, the questions surrounding Dwight felt more ominous. This wasn't just a legend taking a well-deserved rest. Something felt different, and his fans knew it. The late 2000s and 2010s saw Dwight Yoakam become something of a ghost in his own story. The man who had once been ubiquitous on country radio and television, who had commanded stages and silver screens with equal confidence, was now largely absent from public life. He still worked, sporadically releasing albums, taking on occasional acting roles, playing select shows, but the frequency and visibility had diminished to the point where his once devoted fan base was left grasping for scraps of information about their hero. His decision to retreat from the spotlight was deliberate but mysterious. Unlike some artists who publicly announce their semi-retirement or explain their reduced schedules, Dwight simply became harder to find. His public appearances grew rare. His interviews became virtually non-existent. The social media age arrived, and while other country legends embraced the opportunity to connect directly with fans, Dwight maintained his distance. His online presence was minimal, managed by others, offering little insight into the man behind the music. This absence created fertile ground for speculation. In the information void, fans and media outlets alike began filling in the blanks with their own narratives. When tour dates were suddenly canceled or postponed, the explanations were vague, scheduling conflicts, or unforeseen circumstances, which only fueled more questions. Was Dwight seriously ill? Had his voice given out after decades of use? Was he suffering from something he didn't want to make public? Every unanswered question spawned 10 more. The rumor mill went into overdrive. Online forums dedicated to country music buzzed with theories ranging from the plausible to the outlandish. Some claimed he was battling a serious illness. Cancer, heart problems, chronic conditions exacerbated by years of hard living and constant touring. Others suggested he was simply burned out, suffering from depression or exhaustion that made the thought of returning to the spotlight unbearable. Still others insisted he was fine, just enjoying his privacy and fortune, and that fans were overreacting to a simple lifestyle choice. But the concerns weren't entirely unfounded. Those who had seen Dwight during his rare public appearances noted the changes. The physical transformation was undeniable. The weight loss, the weathered appearance, the way he moved more carefully, as if energy was a precious resource to be conserved. Photographs from these sightings circulated online, analyzed and debated by fans desperate for answers. Some defended him, arguing that he simply looked like a man in his 60s. Others saw something more troubling, a fragility that hadn't been there before. Then, in March 2020, came a surprise that briefly cut through the worry and speculation. Dwight married Emily Joyce, a longtime acquaintance, in a private ceremony just before the COVID-19 pandemic shut down the world. Later that year, at age 63, he became a father for the first time. It was a moment of genuine joy, a glimpse of happiness in a life that had seemed increasingly shrouded in mystery and concern. Fans celebrated the news, seeing it as a positive sign that Dwight was doing well, building a family, finding peace. But even this joyful development was filtered through Dwight's fortress of privacy. There were no magazine interviews, no photo spreads, no appearances on talk shows to discuss fatherhood. The world learned of his marriage and son through brief announcements, nothing more. Dwight had found happiness, but he was determined to keep it protected from the public eye that had followed him for decades. While understandable, this reticence meant that fans still had no clear picture of his current state, no reassurance that the man they loved was truly okay. The pandemic years only deepened the mystery. The entire entertainment industry ground to a halt, but even as it slowly restarted, Dwight remained largely absent. Other artists, even those in his age bracket, began touring again, grateful to reconnect with audiences after the long lockdown. Dwight stayed home. Was he being cautious because of health concerns? Was he prioritizing time with his new family? Or was there something more? Each passing year added weight to the questions. Fans who had grown up with guitars, Cadillacs playing on their car radios, were now wondering if they'd ever see him perform live again. The emotional investment ran deep. Dwight's music had been the soundtrack to their lives, had helped them through breakups and heartaches, had celebrated their joys and mourned their losses. The thought that he might be suffering, that the voice that had given them so much comfort might be silenced, was almost too much to bear. The narrative surrounding Dwight began to shift from celebration to elegy. Articles that mentioned him increasingly led with phrases like the reclusive country legend or the mysteriously absent icon. What had once been a story of artistic triumph and authenticity was being rewritten as a story of decline and disappearance. The headlines were no longer about his music or his influence. They were about his absence, his silence, his potential frailty. For someone who had spent his career letting his art speak for itself, the irony was cruel. In his silence, others were speaking for him, and the story they were telling wasn't the one he would have chosen. Today, when Dwight Yoakam's name appears in headlines, the tone has fundamentally changed. Once, an article about Dwight would discuss his latest album, his influence on younger artists, or perhaps an acting role that showcased his range. Now, the headlines carry a different weight, often tinged with concern or morbid curiosity. Dwight Yoakam's mysterious absence continues. Where is Dwight Yoakam? Fans worry about country legend's health. These are the stories that dominate, and they paint a picture far removed from the vibrant artist who once dominated the country music landscape. The shift in media focus has been dramatic and, in many ways, unfortunate. Rather than celebrating his vast catalog of work or examining his enduring influence on country music and Americana, contemporary coverage often fixates on his absence and the health speculation that surrounds it. Every rare sighting becomes news. Every cryptic social media post from his managed accounts gets dissected for hidden meaning. The discourse has moved from "What is Dwight creating?" to "How is Dwight doing?" This transformation in narrative raises important questions about legacy and how we remember our cultural icons. Dwight Yoakam built one of the most impressive bodies of work in country music history. He revolutionized the genre not once, but multiple times. First by resurrecting the Bakersfield sound when it was considered dead, then by proving that traditional country could coexist with and even influence rock and alternative music. He sold millions of records, influenced countless artists, and maintained his artistic integrity in an industry notorious for demanding compromise. Yet now, as questions about his health and future dominate the conversation, there's a risk that this remarkable legacy could be overshadowed by the circumstances of his later years. The fear isn't just that fans might lose him, it's that the story of Dwight Yoakam might be rewritten to emphasize his decline rather than his achievements. Instead of being remembered as the cowboy who saved honky tonk, will he be remembered as the legend who faded away mysteriously? It's a narrative many of his devoted fans are desperate to resist. However, there's another way to view this shift in focus. The intense concern that surrounds Dwight, the way fans hang on every piece of news about him, speaks to the profound connection he forged with his audience over decades. People don't worry this deeply about artists they're indifferent to. The anxiety and speculation, while sometimes uncomfortable, are actually testaments to how much Dwight's music meant to millions of people. His songs didn't just entertain, they accompanied people through their lives, provided solace during difficult times, and gave voice to emotions they struggled to express. The current headlines, in their own way, demonstrate that Dwight's influence and importance remain undimmed. An artist who had truly faded into irrelevance wouldn't generate this level of interest and concern. The fact that people care so deeply about his well-being is proof that his legacy is secure, regardless of what the current chapter of his story holds. His absence has become notable precisely because his presence mattered so much. Still, for fans, the emotional experience is complex and often painful. They've watched as the narrative around their hero has shifted from triumph to uncertainty. They celebrate his past achievements while worrying about his present reality. They want to respect his privacy while desperately hoping for reassurance that he's okay. It's a difficult balance, and the lack of clear information from Dwight himself only makes it harder. Some wonder if the fear of losing him has led to a renewed appreciation for his work. There's evidence that it has. Streaming numbers for his classic albums remain strong. Younger artists continue to cite him as an influence, and discussions about his impact on country music have become more frequent and more reverent. Sometimes, unfortunately, it takes the threat of loss to make us fully appreciate what we have. Dwight's music is being heard anew by fans who might have taken it for granted, and discovered for the first time by younger listeners exploring country music's roots. The question remains, how will history remember Dwight Yoakam? Will the recent headlines about health concerns and mysterious absences become a footnote to an otherwise triumphant story, or will they color how we understand his entire career? The answer likely depends on how the next chapters unfold, and perhaps more importantly, on what fans and music historians choose to emphasize when they tell his story. What seems certain is that Dwight's contributions to music and film are too substantial to be erased or diminished by the circumstances of his later years. The albums exist, the performances are documented. The influence on subsequent generations of artists is undeniable. Whether or not he ever returns to regular public life, the work speaks for itself, and it speaks eloquently of an artist who never compromised, never sold out, and never stopped believing in the power of honest, emotionally direct music. When the final accounting of Dwight Yoakam's life and career is written, the headlines of today will likely occupy a small, perhaps poignant chapter in a much larger story of triumph, authenticity, and artistic courage. Yes, the current speculation about his health and his conspicuous absence from public life are concerning to those who love him and his music. Yes, the uncertainty about his future weighs heavily on fans who have followed him for decades. But these contemporary worries cannot and should not overshadow the remarkable legacy he has already established. Dwight Yoakam's place in country music history is not only secure, it's monumental. He took a genre that was losing its connection to its roots and reminded everyone why those roots mattered. He proved that you could honor tradition while still sounding contemporary, that authenticity and commercial success weren't mutually exclusive, that compromising your artistic vision was never necessary if you believed in your work deeply enough. These lessons resonate far beyond country music. offering a blueprint for any artist trying to navigate the treacherous waters between creative integrity and commercial viability. The music he created, from the raw honky-tonk energy of guitars, Cadillacs, to the haunting introspection of 1,000 miles from nowhere, from the rollicking swagger of Honky Tonk Man to the tender vulnerability of I Sang Dixie, this catalog of work has already earned its immortality. These songs will continue to find new audiences long after current concerns have faded. They will continue to comfort the heartbroken, energize the downtrodden, and remind listeners that real country music still exists, if you know where to look. Perhaps Dwight will surprise us all. Perhaps the cowboy has one more ride left in him, one more album that reminds us why he mattered in the first place, one more tour that proves the fire hasn't entirely gone out, or perhaps his story as a public figure has reached its natural conclusion and he's content to live quietly with his family, enjoying the privacy he always craved and the peace he certainly deserves. Either way, his legacy is intact. For the artists he influenced, and they are legion, spanning country, rock, Americana, and alternative music, Dwight provided a model of how to build a lasting career on your own terms. For the fans whose lives his music touched, he provided a soundtrack to their joys and sorrows, a voice that understood their struggles and celebrated their resilience. For the industry that initially rejected him, he provided an uncomfortable but necessary lesson about the dangers of homogeneity and the enduring appeal of authenticity. The headlines may focus on health concerns and mysterious absences, but those who truly understand Dwight Yoakam's importance know better. They understand that his contribution to American music transcends any single moment or health scare. They understand that the skinny jean-wearing, honky-tonk playing rebel from Kentucky changed country music forever, and that change cannot be undone. So yes, we worry about Dwight because we love him and his music. Yes, we wish he would offer some reassurance, some glimpse behind the curtain of privacy he's carefully constructed. But whether or not those wishes are granted, we can still celebrate what he's given us. Decades of honest, powerful, transformative music that will endure long after the current speculation fades. The story of Dwight Yoakam isn't over, but even if it were, it would be a story worth telling and retelling. A story of an artist who refused to compromise, who honored his influences while forging his own path, who proved that staying true to yourself was not only possible but could lead to lasting greatness. The headlines may change from week to week, but that truth remains constant. To his fans, cherish the music, listen to those albums again, share them with younger listeners who need to discover what real country music sounds like. Honor his legacy not by speculating about his health, but by celebrating his art. That's what endures. That's what matters. And that's what will ensure that Dwight Yoakam's influence continues to shape American music for generations to come, regardless of what the current headlines say. The cowboy may have ridden off into the sunset, but the trail he blazed remains visible, well-worn, and ready for others to follow.